I used to, like I'm someone who used to write, so I always write things out. So sometimes, like if I'm, early on, or if I'm frustrated with something, I'm like, this is me, it's not the client, it's not the experience, it's not the thing I'm trying to make, it's me. It's like, I've got this block that's blocking me or something, so I could write it out, or, do something like that where I'm being honest with myself, transparent with myself, not necessarily with the client. They get the
distilled.
Yeah, they get they get the benefit of it, but you don't have to share that with them directly. It comes across in the job, just with how you carry yourself. So, yeah, being honest with yourself, and
I like that. Yeah.
Site to Studio episode 4. We've only put out one episode so far. Had a 4-month break. Now we're getting back into it. Durwin, thank you for coming. Could you give a short introduction to the people about who you are and what you do?
Okay, my name's Durwin. I run a business called Custom Industrial. Essentially, we do custom metalwork, architectural metalwork. We do furniture, and we're involved in the art world a little bit with some fabrication of sculptures and artists' work and installations of that as well.
Yeah. And I think a lot of our viewers might have seen your work on Instagram and maybe thought it was very cool, and you've built up quite a bit of a following there as well. So again, thank you so much for coming, and hope we have a good chat today. Yeah. So I guess the natural place to start is to understand how you got into metalworking.
It was a desire to start to weld, and that was probably about 10 or 12 years ago. I'd only done a little bit of arc welding or stick welding on site. Previously, I was a carpenter builder, so I'd been building houses for a long time, and there was always a need to sort of weld a tab on here or there, and I was pretty keen to put my hand up and have a crack at it, even though I couldn't weld. So, and then when I started Custom Industrial, I wanted to learn to TIG weld.
Right.
So, and the desire to sort of leave welds exposed on some of the work I was doing. So, there was a need to sort of hone that skill and practice it and get it to a point where I was comfortable with it, where I could leave an exposed weld on a job. So that took a while sort of to, develop that skill. And, ended up when I started Custom Industrial, I bought a MIG welder and a TIG welder, and I didn't even know how to set them up.
Yeah.
And I had a friend of mine who was kind of a general fabrication and machining wizard, and he came and set up my TIG welder for me and gave me a few tips, and then I used to pay him to weld on the furniture in my workshop so I could sort of learn off him. So I don't know if that answered your question.
So you've only been doing this for 10, 12 years, the metalworking side?
No, less than that. I started Custom Industrial in 2014.
Right.
And I started welding on those jobs too. So it was pretty much just self-taught and, developing those skills and just stuffing a lot of stuff up and redoing it and figuring out how to do it and attacking it that way. So I've never done an apprenticeship in that. I put myself through an apprenticeship. So when I started to get practice the TIG welding, I committed to doing an hour every day for a year before I started any other work for the day. So I'd get up really early, go into my workshop, and I'd just practice on scrap bits of metal, TIG welding for an hour and a half. And then I saw there was a course in America. It was a 2-day course run by a guy there called Brian Fuller and Mark Prosser, and they build sort of cars and motorbikes and things, and they offered a TIG welding course. And it was a 1-day course for metal and a 1-day for aluminium. And I'd never really studied the science behind it, but I figured there was nothing else in Australia where I could go and learn, in a day, like do a 1-day course. Nothing I could find anyway. So I bit the bullet and flew over to Atlanta for a week and did the 2 days, and it was awesome. they were kind of questioning why I was there, because I'd been practicing for a year, but I didn't understand all the technical stuff behind it. And they gave me that data and formed a pretty good friendship with Mark, who's a full-time welding instructor in Wisconsin. And he just said to me, he said, look, anytime you got a question, send me an email. And he goes, you got me for life. So he goes, you come from Melbourne to Atlanta for a day or 2 days, so we'll, I'll commit to you. So when I came back to Melbourne, I did that when I needed to. I could send him a photo and ask him, this is what I'm doing. What, I know it's not right. What am I doing that's wrong? And he'd tell me, and went from there. I could make the adjustment straight away. So I committed to another year of practicing before I'd leave any sort of exposed TIG welds on my work, before I was happy with my quality. So
right. So for me, that's quite incredible to hear that you've only been in this particular trade for less than 10 years. Looking at your Instagram, I would assume this guy looks like an older gentleman. He's been doing this 20, 30, going on 40 years maybe even. No, you're not that old, 20, 30 years. So it's quite incredible to hear the shift that happened in your career and how quickly you picked it up and have really risen to the top, if, dare I say. I mean, you probably wouldn't necessarily agree.
I still don't call myself a welder. Doesn't sit comfortable with me. I only just got used to calling myself a fabricator, so it's kind of what I feel out when we're allowed to travel.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting because everyone calls me the metal guy, and I was the timber guy for 20, 25 years plus. So I learned all those skills then. So I saw it as something that was fairly transferable over to metal. And it was just a few technical things I had to pick up, a few hand skills and stuff. And I think by committing to that, it came along pretty quick. And it was a desire to want to do it. I've met a lot of people like, I really want to learn to TIG weld. And I'm like, cool, just do it. And it's like anything. If you're not going to have a crack at it, then you're never going to get good at it. You're going to be pretty average for a while. And I was terrible for a while. You get frustrated at why it wouldn't click and stuff. But, I just sort of see, personally, it's metalwork is just now the material I kind of use mainly. I was timber for a long time, and, those skills are transferable, so I'm just using steel now, or metal or brass. So,
yeah. And as a young person where, if I may speak broadly, patience is such a rare commodity, it's really interesting and inspiring to hear how you develop the skill by just going at it, keep showing up, and just practicing every single day. And the progression, the speed of the progression really being driven by the passion and the want to do that. And then the idea of learning this new skill without going through without going through a traditional apprenticeship route and still being able to develop the skills that you have. I think that's really cool. I think that's really interesting to hear.
Yeah, look, I'm the most impatient person in the world, Charlie, so it surprises me some days too. But it's interesting. I'm a little bit, when I sort of started out in the building industry, I didn't technically have a traditional apprenticeship in carpentry either, but I do learn that way. Like, I learn best when I'm watching someone's hands and listening to them explain why they're doing it, versus someone writing something on a blackboard or reading the technical aspects out of a book. So, and I guess that's kind of what an apprenticeship is traditionally, is, watching and observing and taking in all that information and then just practicing it. So, yeah, but nowadays there's so much information that's available to everyone. You can be kind of a YouTube expert in 5 minutes, which is totally cool as well. It's a different way of learning, but I think it's a good opportunity where you can learn both ways. So it was interesting for me where I didn't have that visually watching too many people, but I was able to bring people in or ask the right questions at the right time, once you've practiced for a bit. So, I guess when you start something and it's new, you've probably got 1,000 questions, but you don't know which one to ask first because you don't know where you're at, you don't know your position. So once you sort of had a go yourself and figured a few things out, then you can kind of ask someone or email someone or get onto a forum and ask a more, I guess, more educated question, so you can sort of jump a couple of levels in your skill as well.
Right, yeah. I think when I'm trying to ask for advice, I think you're 100% correct. It's what's the information you're trying to extract, and being more specific about it, and making it easier for the other person to give you the information that you want. Yeah.
I think it's the fact that, I get asked a lot how I do things on the internet, and just because I post my work, people think I'm willing to share, and I am willing to share with most, but if it's interesting, you can't tell if it's a question out of laziness, like how do you do that? And it's several years of practice. It's this method, and most people just want to know how you got to the end product. So it's, if someone asks me something and they're coming at it from a point of view where they've invested some time themselves, and I think, okay, well, that's a bit different, like I'm pretty open to that and willing to share and say, well, look, this is what helped me, or here's a little tip that, got me through that section of knowledge or whatever. So
yeah. I just want to sort of circle back into how you got into this, because I thought it'd be a sort of an answer that would be stretched over a longer period of time. And because I'm very interested about the journey that people sort of go through, could I get an understanding as to how it all started, even in the building game? How did you get into carpentry, and then where did that story start?
Well, I think I had a passion for timber and machinery and steelwork when I was really young. The family business is based out in the wharf, and it's timber. It's timber importation, and basically it's a trucking business, which is still running now. It's in its 4th generation, and that's where I started working out in the wharf in the late 80s, early 90s, just, with my cousins driving trucks and the big forklifts and just big packs of timber, like all the Oregon and the Merval that used to come into Melbourne. We used to work the docks and unload the ships and load the trucks and drive them, and it was being around all that timber, and I just loved it, like fresh cut timber with all the ends were painted and stacked as high as you could see. When I was a little kid, I remember running around the yard and climbing up the packs of timber. So I've always been around the material, like the cut material ready for building industry, I guess, from a young age, even before I thought I'd want to be a carpenter. And just always liked tinkering when I was a kid, which kind of surprised my parents in a way, because Dad was more of a white-collar worker as an office worker, and Mum was a teacher. Mum was very creative though, so that's probably where I get a lot of my creativity from, and she encouraged that, and always to make your own thing or customise something. You could buy something and then turn it into your own. So I guess that's where that has come from in me. And then, early on when I was in school, 15 or 16, I wanted to leave and do a cabinet maker's apprenticeship. And Mum wanted me to stay until I was at least 17 or year 11. And then I got hooked in the arts and photography and went on to university for a couple of years before I dropped out, and then I went into carpentry. So I was probably late into carpentry. And I think it was more about something to do rather than not something to do at that stage. And did a pre-apprenticeship and just started working on building sites and enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the carpentry because you're there for the whole job. You're digging the holes or the footings. So you're pouring the foundations of the house, and then you're kind of handing the keys to the owner at the end. So you got to see every stage, and that was appealing to me to be there throughout the whole job rather than just a more purposeful trade, like a plasterer or a plumber who comes in and just does one thing. Just did that for many, many years, and started making furniture in my spare time when I was probably in my late 20s, just tinkering and making pretty basic stuff. And I think it took another 10 years to have a crack at it myself. So I was on a building site till I was about 39 or something, and then I got to 40 and I'm like, I really want to have a crack at this. I want to have a crack at running my own business, basically doing furniture, and I didn't want to get to 50 or 60 and go, I wish I'd done it 10 years earlier, because I'd already felt like that already. So, I just started the business, started making a few things, got some clients early on. It was pretty industrial-based furniture back then, and that's when the mix of steel started coming into it, and I started to educate myself on steel and how I could make it. I wanted to do as much of it as I could in-house.
Right.
So that was my approach to, or how I got into carpentry. Custom industrial.
Yeah. So it was being around the timber and just that forming part of your identity that led you into carpentry, and then this desire to do something and to not regret not doing something you wanted to do that led you into doing furniture, and then obviously the creativity from your mother and the idea of wanting to bring something of your own to life, and the running the business that then led you into custom industrial, and then with the natural growth and demand for metalworking as part of your scopes, that's where you really dove into what you do now.
Yeah, it was interesting. I can put it down to one thing that I was commissioned to make probably in late 2015, which was a metal screen or a bladed screen, and it was pretty architectural. It's a really good friend and client I still do a lot of work for now. I started sort of posting photos of that, and I think it got noticed by a few people, a few builders or a few architects or designers in what I was doing. I was starting to get a bit more of a following there, and it was a real step up for me in skills. I had to learn a lot in that, and it was involved metal finishing and engineering and machining and all that kind of stuff. So I really kind of cut my own path with that as well, and then a lot of the work from the building industry started to sort of come with that, and it was less and less furniture, which was interesting, but it was good as well. So,
well, I think just looking at the work that you do, the way I see it is you're solving a very difficult problem in a lot of this custom metalworking scope. It's I imagine it's very difficult to procure, and you make it easy for them because you centralize the information, you centralize the skills to be able to do it, and you solve that problem. I think that's how I see it. And in the architectural building game, there's naturally more money in the market than, say, in one-off custom furniture pieces. So I can see how that's happened and how that's very appealing.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely, as a commercial aspect to the business, it pays a lot better than doing one-off custom side tables or whatever. So, and I still like to do that, and it was a decision this year to, dedicate some time to making a few more of my own things and getting back to that furniture and actually, directing a lot of the skill I've achieved in the last couple of years, and like, okay, now I know I can do this, and this is different. It's just opened up so many more avenues for me to be able to do more out there stuff. And I think you're right too. Like, I was chatting to a friend of mine who we used to work together in the building industry. We'll project managers together at the same company, and I think my background in building and carpentry and being a project manager and understanding a job architecturally and what an architect's intent was and what the client's trying to achieve, and then putting that into metalwork and metal fabrication, I thought was pretty unique. And my friend reminded me a couple of years, he said, no, it's like really unique. Like, there's not a lot around, or he couldn't think of anyone that had my background of knowledge of how a building went together as a metal fabricator. So it was kind of like, had to step aside and think, oh, actually he's pretty right. So I think that's appealing to a lot of people, where as, say, a metal fabricator, for an architect to come to me, or a builder or a client, and know that I understand what the intent is, or the design intent, or what they're trying to achieve, and can actually try and produce the majority of it in metalwork. So
I think you hit on a really important point there, which is how is the value proposition, what is it comprised of, right? And I think there's this idea of, well, do you become a specialist in any one particular thing, or do you become more of a generalist in a few things? But when those general skills get pieced together, you have a really unique and really valuable proposition for the market. I think that's a really and then once you pair that with the passion for what you do and the willingness to even try to understand, say, an architect's design intent, I mean, I can see why it's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. Like a breadth of knowledge is probably more important than a depth of knowledge. I think when I was growing up, to be really knowledgeable on one topic and just know everything about that, and just go to the full depths of that and understand that, was important. Like, and everybody specialised. Whereas now, I think if you have a really good understanding of a lot of different things, you can collectively put them together, or you can go down an avenue that you probably wouldn't go down before, because you understand that, I can skip across a few different topics and get a basic understanding. And I think that's why I was kind of transferable from timber to steel as well, because a lot of the skill sets are the same. I mean, there's some technical stuff with the welding that's totally different, but how things go together and, just the material you're using is just different. If you've got some skills in other areas, then it's totally transferable. So,
do you think that also happened because of a shift in the culture where it's no longer demonized to have more than one focus, or it's not looked down upon to be more of a generalist? Just asking as a young person who was born in the 90s. So
is it looked down?
Well, I think, my assumption was that, say, 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that to be a generalist was less respectable than being a specialist in something, or was that not the case?
You're probably right. I'm not sure if I felt that way personally, but I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was a thing. Like, I just remember when I started out, like, everything was segmented to different trades on a building site, and jobs went as long as they did, maybe 2 years, whereas now we're trying to build them in 14 months or 12 months. And when the plasterer was on the job, there was no one else on the job. When the electrician was on the job, there was very rarely anyone else, maybe the plumber. So it was like everyone had the run of the job, whereas now timelines and deadlines and everyone grouping everyone together, you're kind of gaining all that knowledge off the other trades. So I guess breadth of knowledge comes into it a little bit there. But I don't know, I was always interested in what the other trades did, and I always thought that, I'd watch a plasterer trowel a ceiling, and, I can plaster, but I'm not that good at it. I don't really like it. But it's interesting to watch another trade work and try and mirror their skill set, or make it applicable to what you're doing, or having an understanding of that as well.
Yeah.
And, when I was a young guy asking old guys questions, if you showed half an interest, a genuine interest in what they did, they'd share stuff with you. Like, there was a genuine... Most people will do that if you show an interest. If you're genuine interest in what they're doing or how they did something, most people will show you or tell you. So,
do you find that that's less the case these days? Do you think people are a little more guarded?
I think they were. I think everyone's a bit more open now.
Okay.
I guard some things, but maybe a technique or a finish or something that I've kind of developed myself, and I might share it with some people, or there's a group of like Insta friends I've got who are other metal workers, and we share like tips on how to do stuff. Or it's not like a basic forum. We'll just ask each other a question or something, and we're pretty open with sharing that way. And it's a two-way street, so it's nice. But But yeah, I think in general people are sharing a lot more. People are a lot more open. I think 5 or 6 years ago it was pretty secretive.
Mm. Well, I can't speak to metalworking because I don't understand, because I don't know the value of, say, having a technique. You know, I'm not sure what that intellectual property means, say, from a commercial standpoint or from an artistry or a trade standpoint. But I for me, certainly, I sort of want to be able to say even more or share even more, but I feel like I'm restricted sometimes by, I guess, how other people play the game or how things are. So I find that really interesting. So what is it about, say, sharing how you do a certain blackened finish? What is it about that you or others in the community aren't too fond of?
As in not sharing?
Yeah, not sharing.
That's an interesting question. I think it depends on, in a way, who you're sharing it with. And I find that difficult to say because I think, well, you should be able to share everything with everyone, you know. But I don't know. There's a technique that I've sort of started to do that is not, I haven't invented anything. I've just figured out my way of doing it, and it's maybe unique in the way as in what I can apply it to and how I can apply it. And it's an appealing sort of visual look, so everyone kind of like really likes it, you know, and really sort of like, oh, how do you do it? So I think it's more of a, people want to know just out of curiosity, not because they're going to start doing it themselves.
Right. So is there some element in there that's like, it's almost a branding move where it's like, where that mystery, and if you don't like the word branding, we can say reputation or whatever.
That's okay.
Is it, you know, it's cool to sort of say, you know, this is a technique that we developed and to have that mystery around it is a nice thing, even for the client. It's
100%.
Nice. Yeah.
I think that's the appeal to it. You know, I'm using that technique on a job at the moment, and I haven't posted anything about it. We've been doing this job for a year on the side, and there's probably going to be 2,000 or 3,000 hours worth of my time in it personally into this stuff. You know, we're documenting it. We still don't want to reveal the technique because I think that for me, not revealing everything, it's a bit like a magician or a magic's trick. You know, like you want to keep that air of interest. And I think there's a good example. A friend was telling me the other day that Rolls-Royce doesn't tell people how long their cars take to make. They haven't let that known to anyone.
I like that.
You know, so it's like, oh, it might be 6 months, it could be 8 months, it could be 9 months to hand build one. They've never publicly said, and they never tell any clients how long it takes to do it. So I think that part of it is interesting, you know, like, yeah, show what it looks like, show parts of it, show some of the process. But I think the appeal of keeping some things a mystery is, you know, you'll get future enjoyment out of it. If I've made something for you and there's a part of it that you can look at it and you can see the whole thing, but you can't figure it out. Like once you figure it out, like the mystery's gone. So it just becomes something different then.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that perspective. It reminds me, I was talking to Cam was on here last week, and I was telling him how I made an Instagram post pretty much saying that, you know, we make mistakes and, you know, we're not the best, but this job turned out really good. And there was some backlash. There was a hit to consumer confidence to my clients. Yeah. And I sort of came around and I thought, you know, who am I to take away the confidence of the client? Who am I to take away from that consumer experience? And maybe I was even virtue signaling a little bit, saying, look at how honest I am or whatever. So I really like that idea of, it's not about necessarily that you don't want to share, or it's not necessarily even about that technique, but through that you create a better experience for the client and you're creating a better product. I really like that perspective.
That's how you make people feel, and the experience when they engage with you, that I think also, you know, like you can get a lot of things readily available. And, you know, any kind of experience, if you ring up or you want to order something online or you want to speak to someone, you know, how they answer the phone, how they treat you, it's just, that's the experience you're going to get, you know. So I think early on I understood that no matter what industry I'm in the service industry first. And if I can own that part of, you know, own that little niche in what I'm doing, you know, give people good service, make them feel good, you know, basic stuff. It's not difficult to let people have a good experience.
Yeah.
You know, turn up on time, do what you're going to say you're going to do, be honest. You know, if you're having trouble with something or you need an extension in time, be honest with people, be communicative with them, and just let them know, you know. And then that's just respected, and there's no, I don't think you can have a backlash when you're like that. You can't, you know, once you own something and you're honest about it, if you make a mistake or, you know, if you're honest with people, then they respect that a lot more, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, for me, a big part of being honest is about managing my own expectations, and I don't want to create this framework for myself where I'm so anxious about delivering on something. So it's almost to relieve myself of that pressure, you know. But I think I've turned the corner a little bit on that type of perspective, on that idea of full transparency, because the mystery is a beautiful thing at the same time.
It's more about being honest with yourself and transparent with yourself than directly with the client,
right?
As well. So it probably sounds like it's part of that as well. So
yeah, self-judgment is a killer.
Yeah. I used to, like, I'm someone who used to write, so I always write things out. So sometimes, like, if I'm, you know, early on, or if I'm frustrated with something, I'm like, this is me, it's not the client, it's not the experience, it's not the thing I'm trying to make, it's me. It's like I've got this block that's blocking me or something, so I could write it out, or, you know, do something like that where I'm being honest with myself, transparent with myself, not necessarily with the client. They get the
distilled.
Yeah, they get they get the benefit of it, but you don't have to share that with them directly. It comes across in the job, just of how you carry yourself. So yeah, being honest with yourself. And
I like that. Yeah. What are you thinking about these days in terms of branding and whatnot? Is that something that you actively think about?
Definitely. I rebranded the business was it a year and a half ago, and shifted more away from the industrial part of it to a more architectural branding, or a more sort of art world branding, and we changed the site a little bit like that. So yeah, it was good. It was time to do it, you know. That brand had to catch up with the work, because the work came quickly with all the architectural world and so forth. So we had to. It just felt right to rebrand the business, you know, visually. And yeah, it was good. It was a good thing to do. The people we engaged with were long-time clients of ours, and it was a lot of trust there. So it was, for me, it was a good, enjoyable experience to be a client myself and enjoy the process, because
I love it.
I'd learnt so much from those guys about experience. So, and they're the ones we're doing the big secretive job for at the moment. So it was nice to sort of sit back and go, okay, I'm being the client, show me all the cool stuff, you know, here's my brief. To write a brief was really nice. To write a brief to someone you knew pretty well and trusted and respected, and write a brief in their language, as in, you know, their luxury branding. So it was nice to sort of tailor it to suit them. Yeah, it was good. It's a good experience.
Yeah, I can really relate to the experience. But, you know, I love consulting people in my industry. Say if I'm looking at software suites or whatever, or if I'm I have guys who do creative work for me, and just sort of giving them a brief on a creative project, and it's an excellent creative outlet as well for me, that process. I do want to ask you, what is the value of brand identity to you? What is that to you? Because I think it's something that construction industry businesses don't think about as much as, say, some other sectors.
Well, it's more than a logo, I think, for sure. I guess brand identity encapsulates who you are, what you're doing, and maybe where you're heading as well. So it might be something that you're trying to grow into. It's a vision of what you want, not necessarily what you're currently doing. But yeah, I think it's important, but I think what you're doing it and how you're doing it is more important than brand identity, but I guess essentially that's brand identity as well.
Yeah, isn't it interesting?
And I look at most things, and I think no matter what you're doing and what it comes down to, it's a results-based industry as well, like most industries are. So it's, you're only as good as your last job, or how you made someone feel on your last job, or the experience, whether it was good or not, that becomes brand identity as well.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm curious as to, so what are some things that you learnt in that branding process, or just to provide some audience to provide some value to anyone who's listening? What should they be thinking about when they are developing or redeveloping their brand ID?
That's a good question. What they're trying to achieve, as a business.
Yeah.
Where they're going with that. What their intent is with that. So, and whether that rebranding visually needs to, how that represents to that. So that narrative that talks to it. So, and do your research on whether you're rebranding yourself, or if you're engaging with a designer or a graphic designer, or, a branding business, to, do your research on them too, and look at their work and what they're doing, and their look and feel is my look and feel too. So it's, if you're pitching something to them or writing a brief for them, then it's in their wheelhouse, or that's in their,
Yeah.
I wouldn't, if I wanted some architectural joinery, would I go to someone who just does, high volume builds? Probably not, because they wouldn't know. I wouldn't understand what I'm trying to do either. So it's, I guess, do your research on who you're trying to engage with to help you rebrand to, and see what they come up with and what they can bring to the table with what you pitch to them as well.
Yeah. I think that all makes sense. And so something else I want to ask you about was, so that's branding, and then your marketing. So you're, from looking at, say, just your Instagram presence, content marketing is a very significant part of your marketing strategy, it looks like.
It's the only one.
And I was trying to be generous.
That's all right.
And
Instagram's good for that.
And I think why you excel at it is you're trying to give to the audience. You're trying to provide value to them. And I'm not sure if that comes naturally because it's an outlet, because you like writing, because you like, you're passionate about this. Like Cam says, I don't even think about this type of stuff. So I'm not sure whether, are you thinking about, how can I provide the most value to the audience in this blog post, or is it more for you and people just come to it because they relate?
It's essentially more for me. I mean, I understand I've got some kind of an audience or followers and people who enjoy what I do. So I post stuff that I want to post, that I like, or details that I want to reveal or show to people, and so forth. So, and I only use Instagram. I have stuff on my website, but I haven't updated it for probably a year, so it probably needs to freshen up with current work. But
luckily, no one's looked at it in a year.
Yeah,
because I'm not saying you. I'm just saying websites in general. Yeah.
So it's, it's a digital business card. It's nice.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see that, he's got a website, so he's legit. He has registered that business name, so which is interesting. But as far as what I post, on the main feed, I try and keep it, bigger projects or details within bigger projects or what I'm currently working on, and I'm pretty selective with that now. Early on, I wasn't. But nowadays I'm pretty selective, so I may not post on that too often, maybe once a week. And I tend to post in my stories on a Sunday, more fun stuff and more my view of the world for the week is kind of where I pitch that at. So it might be a sequence of photos I've taken throughout the week or little details of things. I'm like, that'll be good for my story, so I'll just put that in the save album, and then for me, it keeps it interesting. So it's like my narrative for the week is told visually once a week in my stories in Instagram, and then maybe once a week or once a fortnight I post on the main feed, which is my main body of work, of what I'm working on, like the bigger projects in the workshop.
Yeah. I'm going to... So something... I might push back a little bit on this idea of reducing volume. Granted, you've already done such a great job with building a following and community on the page. But I feel like volume and content and the quality of content is a subjective thing. Granted, if you take the approach of this is just for me, then by all means, none of this matters. But I think quality is subjective, and the value that someone might be extracting from that piece of content isn't for anyone to judge. That's for them. And I don't think reducing the frequency may necessarily align perfectly with your goals for the business. Maybe.
Depends what my goals for the business are.
Right. That's without knowing that.
I agree with you, and I also, because I thought when to build Instagram following or to build a connection with some type of audience over time, early on, my belief was I've got to post pretty regularly. Every day. This was before stories were even a thing. I think they've only been around for 2 years, maybe.
Right, so I was 5.
Well, I've only been on Instagram maybe 5 or 6 years or something. So, and my personal values are not necessarily in line with a heavy social media presence at the moment. So, what I'm doing in other areas of my life, like I think Instagram's good, but I'm also want to be able to put it at an arm's length if I need to. So for me, slowing down that regularity of content posting to just my stories weekly and stuff on my main feed when I feel it's worthy. I've got lots of stuff, like, trust me, Charlie, like every 4 or 5 days I find a photo and I get ready to post it, and I'm like, is that good enough to put on? And I'm pretty critical of that now. So I'm like, is that just a photo or an image I'm putting out just to put an image out? Or is it something I'm really happy with that image? Does it show what I've made or what I've created or what I've been a part of to its best? And most of the time it doesn't, so I don't post it now.
Right.
So that's where I'm coming out with that. But I think depending what your goal or your intent is with your Instagram feed, if it's to gain a lot of followers, then I think you've got to put out a lot of good content and pretty regularly, once or twice a day. Depends what your goal is. Mine's not to have a heap of followers. It's to have people who, can appreciate my work, an Instagram family where I can share knowledge equally with other makers and appreciate things. So that's my kind of deal with Instagram or social media or putting my work out in the public domain. It's an easy format to do it, but I'm also just wary of all the social aspects of it too. So it's interesting now, the other side of it.
Totally agree with you. I recently turned off notifications on my phone so I don't get any buzzes or rings or anything apart from phone calls. So so I totally understand where you're going with that, especially as a young guy who's grown up with it, right? So I can, I really respect that. Yeah. What about sort of, so you've gone from carpentry to furniture to industrial furniture to architectural metalwork, and now allowing more time for furniture and those smaller custom pieces that may not make as much sense on the balance sheet perspective. So where is everything heading for you? What are your aspirations?
To lock myself in a shed and just make stuff for myself. I don't know how I'm going to do that. I mean, I know I can do it, but whether I can sustain paying bills and things like that, yet to be seen. But so I'll kind of like keep the status quo with work that comes in, and just trying to balance it a bit more out where, the commercial stuff is really good financially, and it's good branding wise, and it's good, allows me to, explore a lot of possibilities with work. So it's good financially for the business too to have that work, but it also allows me to do smaller, more meaningful projects that don't have a big budget, that I would probably invest more of my time in than I would with, a commercial project, and get a lot less money for it. But it interests me, or I want to do it, or the person I'm engaging with couldn't normally afford to do that. So that allows, the commercial aspect of that business allows me to give back in a way where I can. And I've done a lot of that this year, especially with COVID, with friends with businesses and, who haven't been fortunate enough to be able to work through COVID and totally shut down. So I've been able to do things for them. So probably a little bit less commercial, but enough to keep the other stuff going is where I'm heading. And to have one decent side project of my own, furniture or an exploration of material going in the background consistently. So that's kind of where I made a conscious decision this year to back a little bit off the commercial stuff and, dedicate chunks of time to myself to either relearn a new skill or hone a current skill and do some projects for myself just for doing them, to see if I can and see what comes of it from that. I mean, ideally I'd like to be back doing, furniture and interesting objects, whether they're commissioned or I'm just, ideally I'd just like to be making things and then sell them at the end. This is what I'm making at the moment. It might be a chair, it might be sculpture, it might be something interesting or weird, or it might be a motorbike, I don't know. So I can just make it, and if someone wants to buy it at the end, great.
I think one pathway to locking yourself in the shed and making stuff is to continually build the brand and pivot off and leverage off the brand to be able to create revenue from other sources. Perhaps something like selling custom pieces for I can't say the word, a lot of money, exorbitant amounts of money. Perhaps that doesn't align with your personal value structure. So, but there are other ways I'm sure that you could. So maybe that is one pathway. And then since you enjoy documenting and writing and whatnot, maybe creating content for those passion projects and building brand, leveraging off that to build brand and build following. And maybe that's one way to get to the shed.
Mentally I'm in the shed already, I'm already there. So, there'll be a big shift towards that in the next couple of years, physically, as in moving locations, hopefully, and, living the lifestyle I want to live, which is a bit more self-sufficient on the land. And, I don't have just lowering overheads in general if I can. And, just be content with that. Yeah. So, and I'm a guy that gets bored pretty quickly. I don't like building the same thing twice. So if someone comes to me and they've got, hey, we want to build 50 of these, I'm like, it has to be pretty interesting. Like this secret project I'm doing it is repetitious, but the narrative and the story behind it like we were always debating of how many of these things we're going to make. And the number that we set it on is really high. Physically, it's going to physically with what I have to do with the work, as a fabricator point of view, it's going to annihilate parts of my body, as in it's physically demanding on me. So I know I have to commit to it, but it's a run of X amount, and I think the concept behind the amount we're doing is perfect. So it has to be done, So that's kind of interesting to me. So I just think when projects, I guess the brand's always evolving, like my work's always evolving. So whether I have to build it or not, or just be me, and this is what I'm doing now, maybe that's the brand, and maybe that's what's the appealing thing, whereas someone can come to me and be like, like I was saying before, if you're pitching, visually what you want your brand to be to a graphic designer, you want to bring something that challenges them, but is kind of in line with their principles. So if someone brings something to me that's left of field and I've never done it before and it's really interesting, then I'd rather take that job on than the one that pays to keep me comfortable for 6 months. The interest in the job's more appealing to me than the money in the job.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, money's nice. You've got to have it to...
Ducati, baby.
So, well, there you go. Yeah, you've got to work hard for it. But,
yeah.
That was an interesting story. That was a 2-year goal,
The motorbike.
Yeah, totally. I had to do a lot of stuff, change a lot of stuff in myself to be in a position to buy it. So, 2 or 3 years ago, the business side of the business was not great. I really wanted to pack it in. I'd had enough. I was ready to... family business is trucking. They lift containers off the wharf and we unload them in the yard. So I spoke to my cousin. I go, can I put a 40-foot container in the back of the yard? He goes, yeah, what for? I go, I just want to put all my tools in it. I've had enough. I'm going to go and work for someone else. He's like, yeah, you just can't access it very often. I'm like, that's cool. So I researched that. I priced them. I was about 2 weeks away from doing it. And then that was 3 years ago. So I was kind of I'd had enough and 3 or 4 years in business, and it was just, the pressure of it and everything, and just, always having to produce, and, I wasn't kind of good on the business side of things. So, had a lot of conversations with my partner, Georgia, and she said, well, look, you've got to want to do it. You've got to really, set your goals on something and want to go after it. And she offered to help me with the financial managerial part of it. So I kind of relinquished that to her in a way, which was kind of a big deal at the time. And she structured it for me. She built that part of the business while I focused on making things and quoting jobs and getting the work in. And, we rented a factory, moved and rented it. I was sharing in a factory with a mate, keep overheads down. So it was a bigger step up in overheads, and I think Georgia even paid for the first month's rent for me.
Yeah.
So there was that commitment, and then I was like, I want this bike. My mates had some, and I'm like, I want it. Yeah. And then I set a 2-year goal to get it. And then I think after the first year, we'd got everything to a point where, we're out of the red, we're in the black, and we're getting in front. And I said to Georgia, all I want for Christmas is you to tell me what day I can go and buy the bike. I remember it was on, that was my Christmas present, 2018. 2018? Yeah. And then she goes, you can buy it on the 30th of the 3rd of March in 2019, last year. So my 2-year goal became a 15-month achievement. And I was kind of pissed at the time because I couldn't even get out and test ride. I was so busy, and then the Easter break came. It was a really funny sequence of events. I was ready to go on the 30th and I couldn't buy the bike for a couple of weeks. So that was a big deal for me, and that was I felt a really good achievement for me personally, and what I had to sort of change in me. That had nothing to do with skill set, fabrication-wise, and nothing to do with, I guess it had something to do with brand, but you know, I had to change a lot of other stuff behind the scenes, and a lot of people had seen to achieve it. I had to make a lot of sacrifices too. I had to work really hard. So did 7 days a week, 14, 16-hour days. I didn't go out, didn't go and see friends. You know, I even knocked back being best man in a wedding overseas because I was just like, this is my focus. This is what I'm, you know, it was that sacrifice to get to that point that, you know, kind of made it worthwhile in the end.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask, what was it in you that you had to change? What were those things that you identified?
For me, it was like my relationship with money. And, you know, previous to that, I'd always been like a week-to-week person. Couldn't save, couldn't do anything. So that was one aspect I had to change. So having that structure and understanding how that worked and seeing it, like I'd never... You know, I didn't grow up with computers as in writing and stuff. Like I could email and stuff and that was about it. And, you know, I couldn't write spreadsheets and things like that. So I couldn't physically see what my business looked like on paper. You know, like receipts come in and out and bills come in and out and things like that. So for me, it was educating about how to run a business properly, you know. So, and that sort of started with the finances and understanding that, you know, more money's got to come in than less is going out to get ahead. So, which you kind of know, but how good, you know, obviously didn't know it well enough. So, it was that part, and that was a struggle, you know, to get a grip of that while I was doing jobs that were pressure jobs, learning a new skill on the floor as well, and you know, all these new different things I was learning with my hands, as well as trying to learn to run the business. So it was pretty full on for a couple of years, but I had to shut everything else out of my life that wasn't involved with it. So, you know, that was the sacrifice.
That's so beautiful. So you know, your partner gave you the ability and gave you the motivation and structured it for you, took on the financial responsibilities. You made that switch in yourself and you freed yourself from, say, your spending habits or your financial habits, and you stripped away so many other things in your life, and that gave you the ultimate freedom to be creative and to focus on your business, and really propelled you.
It takes discipline, and that discipline's the key for that. And it's also like, I get a lot of people come to me and like, I want to do what you do, and you're, you know what you've achieved and stuff like that. And normally my first question back to them is, what do you really like to do? What's your favourite thing to do in the world? And that might be, I don't know, watch TV, or it might be go hang out with the mates on the weekend, or dirt bike riding, or whatever it is. And I'm like, are you willing to just not do that for a whole year to get what you want in business? Because that's probably what it's going to take. Are you willing to sacrifice the favourite thing that you want to do in the world that gives you pleasure? Are you willing to not do that for a whole year to get this bigger thing? That's what stops most people.
Yeah, and it's good that they stop, because that means that they have the self-awareness to know that it's not, especially these days where being in business is so cool. You know, I've got my own business, I do my own business. It's I think it's really important that people don't fall into the trap of getting into business just because they think it's a good idea.
It may not be for you. Like I didn't, you know, I always just want to make things. My classic line is, I just want to build shit. The rest of it can just go away, but I've got to do the rest of it so I can. I've got to sacrifice me making stuff a lot of the time so that I can get that time.
Yeah, I recently heard Mike Tyson say it's all about doing the things that you hate doing every single day. It's all about doing the things that you don't want to do. And that's what really enables you to do. It gives you the freedom to do the things that you actually want to do. That's beautiful. I think all that is extremely inspiring for me as a young person sort of starting in my career. And, I've had a lot of ups and downs, and I think in this compressed timeline of, sort of being so young and being so impatient, sort of everything seems like it's the end of the world. So that's very inspiring to hear from me that, here's someone who at a stage in their life where most people sort of don't have the courage or the means or the ability to do anything or make a change. You've made that change so quickly, obviously through hard work and dedication, and even at the brink of you giving it up, being able to make that change and so quickly be where you are now, I think that's extremely interesting and very inspiring for me.
Yeah, thank you. Look, it's not easy, and, you know, Georgia will attest to that. Like, I fall over a lot, you know, like, but it could have been easy for her to help me out too. But you've got to get up yourself. Like, you're always going to fall over, or you're always going to make a mistake. But until you own it, you know, and you get up by yourself and you're like, okay, that hurt, you know, falling over, and, you know, I didn't make any money on that job, or it cost me more than what I allowed for. But I got up, I finished the job, I bought more material to do it, you know, and the client was happy in the end. That gives you a better feeling than it makes the losing the money go away. Like, it still hurts a bit, but it kind of makes it go away, you know, like how you make it. If you make someone else's day, you know, that's such a good feeling. So, you know, I get to be able to do that with some of the things I make, and that's the appealing part.
Yeah, one of the core values of my business is make less money. You know, don't be brought down by having to spend more money or having to lose money on a job. You know, and it like you said, it is really hard in that moment when you have to make that purchasing decision, or when you have to when you're tested and you consciously have to not cut that corner. But it's that idea is also very freeing, because it frees you from having to make those difficult decisions, because by default we do the right job and we make less money. So I really resonate with that.
Good. If you cut a corner, you just made 2 corners, so you got to navigate 2 more corners up the road. So it's hard. That's the discipline with it too. It's like, I always try and you test it all the time. Like, I might be doing a process and it's like an 8-step process. I'm like, I'm kind of over this. I reckon I could do it in 7. When you do it in 7, I'm like, just needed that 8th step. I don't know why I did it. Now I have to undo like 6 steps to get back to the one I've missed. So it happens all the time.
So where is all this headed? So you know, locking yourself in a shed, where is that it? Is that until the next thing, or you just not phased, you just wait for the next thing to come?
Yeah, the universe brings them now. It's pretty cool. There's a big goal. You know, we want to move out of the CBD. You know, we're out in the suburbs, but we want to move out to land, and create, you know, our world out there. So I've kind of like, I've always wanted to do it, but I've held off on doing it too, because it's, you know, building a house from scratch and it's basically starting over again. So, you know, it took me a long time to allow myself to get excited about it, and now I am. So it's, you know, look, that's the big goal now. Looking forward to that commissioning. I'm looking forward to writing a brief to an architect to design the house that I essentially going to build. I didn't want to build it for a long time, because I'd done it for 20 odd years, and I was, I guess, physically and mentally wasn't up to it. You know, I built so many houses for so many other people that I know what a commitment it takes to do it. It's going to be a year to 2 years full time for me to do it. So I'm kind of like, you know, that's the big goal, to do that, and I want to do it. I don't like to set timelines to too many things, but I do want to do it make the move in the next 2 or 3 years. Because I feel I'm just getting to a point where I'm not going to, you know, physically keep it up. So I'm, you know, wary of that as well, but excited about it too. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Dream project? Dream collaboration?
Yeah. I think I'm doing one of them. at the moment.
Okay, you've been teasing this too much.
Yeah. I might show you some photos later, Charlie. But
Okay.
It's a legacy project. Like, we're both not leaving anything on the table. Like, this is the thing that this project marks 25 years of someone else's work, but it also sets the benchmark for the next 25 years. So it's a collaboration. It's significant.
That sounds hefty.
Yeah. And we're pulling out all the stops on it. So I'm making 25 things, but I'm actually making 28 because I've already made one of them, which was a proof of concept, and I'm doing a working prototype, and then I'll do an artist proof. So I'll make 3 stages of the project, and we're in between the working project and the artist proof at the moment. And then once they're signed off, hopefully by the end of the year, I'll do the run of 25. But yeah, like, I even got a message before I came here, and it was the detail that we did last weekend where the client came in and it was a total change of one aspect of it. And he's just like, we need to chat about it. We just want to make sure we're doing the right decision with it. So it's pretty well thought out. So yeah. I think there's no one specific dream project. I think I'm at a point where clients like this come to me and I'll commit before I even know what it is, because I want to work with them. So, and how they make me feel, and the experience, and what they can bring to the table, and how we can push each other to create something that's beyond what we ever thought we could. And that's kind of what this is. So they're the dream projects. I don't know what they are. It's a feeling. It's about working with the right people. It's trusting your gut with that too. So some things look good on the surface, but my gut might say it's not right. So I've learnt to listen to that a lot more in the last couple of years. So
And who should get in touch with you? Who do you want to hear from? What is that criteria? Sorry, I don't want to be too cold in that description.
No. I'm just filtering the answers in my head, so I don't want to sound too full on. Well,
or maybe the right answer is
someone who's done some research on what I do and who I am a little bit. Whether that's just flicking through my Instagram page, and someone who wants to bring something to me that maybe hasn't been done before, is always a challenge, or and that could be just working something out, not even making something, or it could be, I guess the thing is, I didn't want to say what not to bring to me, but I will. What not to bring to me is like, here's something I've seen online, can you make it? Well, sure, I can make it, but someone else over there is already making it, so get them to make it, Right. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not, the hint's in the name, custom industrial. Like, I want to do custom stuff. I want to do one of one, or, a limited run of something that we've developed ourselves, takes, I want your passion. If you're bringing something to me, I want you to be passionate about it. I want the client to be passionate about it, so that I become passionate from there, how excited they are about it. And that's when we can sort of make some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the criteria. You got to really want it.
That's I think that's perfectly fair. Because only under those circumstances are you able to give your best, and put your best foot forward for that job. I think that makes all the sense.
Yeah, you probably won't get my best if you bring something to me. Like, I don't know, you've got to do those jobs. That's a commercial aspect of it. There can be some interesting parts to it. There's going to be challenging parts to it, but they can be simple as well. And one of my sayings is simple ain't simple. So it's,
Yeah. I think on a personal note, I want to ask you. So, I asked you if you would come on this podcast, and we've never met. we have mutual friends. What is it? Is it you see a young guy, you wonder, he's asking, you want to give him some value, or what? Because you won't get, if we're being realistic, you won't really get anything out of it, and you're not looking to get anything out of it per se. So what part of that chemistry made you agree to come on the show?
I think the appeal is that you're genuine, Charlie. So you're honest. You didn't try and hide anything. You didn't try and get me on here for ulterior motives. You were just like, hey, I'm doing a podcast and this is what it's about. And I'm like, that's pretty interesting, to me. And it's also, you've got to step into the unknown all the time, and you've got to remind, I've got to remind myself to do that a lot as well. So, for me personally, it's like, okay, well, I've been interviewed before once or twice, not a big part of my life. I listened to a few podcasts, I watched a few podcasts, so it's kind of an interesting medium now. And I'm like, well, why not? Why not? It's a good way to spend a Friday afternoon.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, for me, as a young person entering the world, almost, there's a lot of people who have given me opportunities and sort of given me time and advice, whatever, and that doesn't go unnoticed for me. It's very important. It's something that I value very much. So, on a personal note, I want to say thank you.
Pleasure. You're welcome.
And I think that's it all. That's all for today, unless you wanted to say anything else.
No, I'm pretty good. I really enjoyed it. I want to thank you for asking me. I think it's really cool. I think what you're doing is awesome.
We'll do it again.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you.
Pleasure.